Is Marvel Contest of Champions, Kabam, and Netmarble in a bit of a sorry situation when it comes to these Unity changes? Hello everybody, this is the first video of Thursday, and this one is devoted to this Unity situation. You may have known about this, you may not. It's got a lot of problems to smaller developers, maybe larger developers as well, some really big implications. So what am I talking about? Well, as a lot of you know, we play this game called Marvel Contest of Champions on a daily basis. Some play it on an hourly basis. Some people have this game glued to their faces all the time. But let's face it, you don't really know about where it's made. As a lot of you know, various different types of game engines is where you build a game in. It doesn't just like appear. It takes time to build something, largely from the ground up, and largely in certain types of game engines. Like Unreal Engine, which I've done a bit with in the past. But Unity is another option for this game, for games to be made in, but also this game is made in Unity. The big thing at the moment, which you may be hearing about or not hearing about, is Unity are changing their runtime fee. And this particular runtime fee has implications. It has really big implications to a lot of games developers. Now, before doing this video, I wanted to try and make sure I had as much information as possible. For the company that I work for, I had already been kind of like covering this for something else that I'm doing. So I can get a little bit of information from something else, but also just kind of go over this. So, first of all, Unity want to, in a nutshell, make sure they are making as much money as possible from games developers and game studios who put games or build games via their particular game engine and then get popular, go viral, and people like buy their products, buy their games. So they want to scoop a little of that back to them. A lot more, actually, not little, a lot more back to them. I'll give you some case studies in a minute when it comes to all this one, but here on screen is some of the proposed changes, which look at, and what Unity seem to be doing is forcing small developers and developers in general to buy some of their more paid products like Unity Pro, Unity Enterprise, in order to make sure it cushions the blow of a game doing very well. Now, if a game doesn't do very well, then they're in a bit of a sticky situation. If it just barely scrapes the amount of installs and revenue, then it can mean that a developer may be forced to, close, and game studios close, sadly, because you don't normally hear about the great success of an indie developer. But when you do, it's so important because it turns an indie developer into a bigger developer and a bigger developer, and they expand out. They're able to take on more staff. Therefore, it stimulates the development ecosystem for careers. It allows more opportunities. And we're in a real problem at the moment, with shrinking. I was laid off in May because, look, the game industry just shrunk all of a sudden and lots of people were laid off. I think about 40 of the team that I was working in were laid off, so that was really sad. But then you look at situations of going look, stand-up successes. Cult of the Lamb is a great example. They said that they would be removing their game from Unity because they stand to lose a lot of money from this. Because they've had great success. They're one of a very few amount of indie developers that have sold 1.7 million units. Power Wash Simulator's another one from the developer behind that, making $32 million. And people would go, oh, well, it's a lot of money. They should pay some of that back. It's like, no, it's not the case. Because look, they're not Sony. They're not Xbox. They're not Rockstar. They're not any of the big boys and girls that kind of monopolize the gaming industry. They're a small indie developer. And yes, I will bring this back to Marvel Contest of Champions, but it's all about adding context. But do bear in mind, this level of success comes with putting more pressure. And it makes it worse when it's mainstream. And again, we'll bring it back to Marvel Contest of Champions is if it's Netmarble are they're on the, I don't know if they're on the New York Stock Exchange. They do have shareholders. And the problem with having shareholders is that they're always looking to scrape the profits off the top. If they can let a few people go in a company like Kabam, then it can only mean that if something like this means that, Kabam have to wipe off $4.3 million off the ledger, then that takes a tumble into cost savings. And that really damages games from a background, the developer side of things. Less staff are being hired and more staff are having more pressures on them. So therefore more mistakes happen. Now we will try and bring this back to Marvel Contest of Champions where we can. It's difficult to find a definitive answer whether or not this affects microtransaction games like Marvel Contest of Champions and mobile. Mobile seems to be more of a microtransaction type model, so therefore it's difficult to get an idea. Obviously, Unreal does have a revenue share in some sort of shape or form. I don't know if that is dependent on certain things, but it could be a case that on revenue, it may be seen as an issue down the line. And I don't know if that means that, Kabam might say, okay, well, if Unity are going to go this way, we might be going a different way and have to kind of they might have to rebuild Marvel Contest of Champions on a completely new game engine if they are suppressed by Unity. And as I said, the difficulty is I am not finding clear information to say whether or not this is going to affect mobile, because a lot of this seems to pinpoint install. So there still may be potential options if this is affected. We will have to have a look and kind of find out any more. Is this going to be something that Kabam have to think about now? No. Could this be something major towards the end of the year? Yes, if it is indeed affected ongoing, and whether or not Kabam want to foot the bill if indeed affected. Do bear in mind there are some other types of game engines like Godot and Coco's 2D. I've never heard of that one before, but people may kind of opt for this to kind of switch to even Unreal Engine, which is still pretty good. Unreal Engine is pretty good, but it just depends on everybody at Kabam having to. I would not want to kind of have a look at the work that would have to be required in order to ship this game over. But would it maybe run more smoother? I don't know. I don't want to hazard a guess with that. Now there is a lot of things going on at the moment, some kind of potential stock manipulation or share manipulation, in that I think it was CEO had sold a load of shares to Unity the day before. It was the day after this was announced. As a lot of you know, this would create more technical income, which means that if your share price then goes up because the company theoretically at a later date would make more money, and then you sell your shares, it is a bit suspicious, because then that is share manipulation. It is manipulating the system. The same way I think that Tesla did not like it when Elon Musk would say things about Tesla, because when he said something I think bad about Tesla, then the stock price for Tesla tanked. So it's there's obviously some elements of manipulation. There's things where it's you need to be kind of very sure about these things, and I'm sure that will be investigated. But look, if Kabam are affected by this, and do bear in mind, depending on installs, and that's something as well to point out with installs, it's saying maybe because Kabam is a free-to-play game and it's only the microtransactions, they may be affected by revenue threshold for this. But it still could be a case that if there's an install threshold and revenue threshold that exceeds, then it's still a case that for every X amount of revenue earned, potentially, depending on what product Kabam are on, they may have to foot a bill for this, which then down the line could impact on players. Now when it comes to the financial implications for Kabam, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue in one respect. There may be a second respect where it could be a bit of a problem. So from the first respect, it would be a case that, well, this could be bigger for Netmarble than it would be for Kabam. Because if we're talking about Kabam as an entity at one particular point have to announce that, and I think when I worked out the rough kind of sums for it, if we go on a 0.02 cost per install, and again I don't know whether or not Kabam are affected from the revenue side of things. If Kabam are affected from an install perspective, $4.3 million is not going to be any kind of worry to Kabam from a financial perspective, because there was a lot of money made according to the information on the, and again, I may have got this wrong, on Netmarble revenue PowerPoint, there was, and I think from the information, this information here, that $395 million was made from global sales. And of those global sales, Marvel Contest of Champions, Marvel Contest Champion makes 12% of that. Now, if I've assumed that right, which I may have done, may have not, it is assumed that during this particular, I think is it quarter? It might be quarter, that they earned $47 million. The point I'm going to get to, if I've got all these numbers wrong, that's fine. That's not the point. The point is saying, I don't think it's going to be a problem for Kabam. I don't think it's going to be a problem for Netmarble to cover that cost. But I think the problem may be is how it affects and how Netmarble looks at it from what they're giving to their shareholders. Because effectively, if all the games that Netmarble have, and Netmarble have under their belt, does it not say actually how many games they have? It's not 603, is it? Yeah, 600. At this given point, at this particular time, if they got 603 titles under their belt, then it could mean that Netmarble's share price would go down. If Netmarble's share price goes down, then it affects Netmarble. If it affects Netmarble, it means they'll do more cost savings. If they do more cost savings, then it could mean that, you know, this could impact Kabam. I'm not saying it will or won't. It's just a case of cause and effect, if that's the case. And as I said, the big thing that all kind of like stems all this down to is we don't really know how this affects microtransactions, which may not be as bad or may not affect them. It may not even affect the install side of things if you do a free-to-play game. But we'll have to see. I think it's very early to kind of like cover this. This has only been fresh in the last 24 hours. And I've tried to gather in as much information as possible. As I said, like I've seen pages where people have said they feel this is going to affect mobile, but haven't really gone into details of how. Is it on installs? Is it going to be a case that it's going to affect microtransactions? So we're very early to kind of like find out what's going on. But what's your thoughts on this? Do you think there's going to be cause and effect? Do you not? As I said, I'm very skeptical about it because there's not a huge amount clarifying the microtransaction side of things in a game like Marvel Contest Champions and free to play. But as I said, there's always cause and effect if it does affect them. Thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Check out some other content located on screen. And I'll see you maybe for another video. I haven't decided. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.